Morning.
My name is Bill Cashman. I'm the solution engineer for Florida and Georgia for TierPoint. We're a data center partner. We have actually been partnering with TCG for some time, working on a number of different deals with you. I'm here today to talk about our solutions and how to engage us. So TierPoint is one of the largest hybrid IT providers in the United States. When people look at TierPoint on the surface, they think of us as a data center provider. I prefer to think of us as a managed services provider that happens to own data centers. We own 42 data centers from coast to coast, and we provide a broad spectrum of managed services and cloud services. So it all starts with the data center over there on the right. On top of the data center, we have basic buckets of solutions that include cloud, managed services, and co-location. So for us, cloud would be multi-tenant. We have a multi-tenant cloud that we own and we provide. We do private cloud, and then we also do what they call hyperscale cloud in Azure and AWS. We provide a managed solution for Azure and AWS. Managed services for us is anything really top to bottom on your IT infrastructure. We provide hosting, we provide management, so we can become the Windows and Linux admins. We provide high levels of security, help a lot of customers meet PCI, HIPAA, all kinds of different high levels of compliance and security. And then database management, so your customers probably all have SQL servers and Oracle servers in their infrastructure. We can be the guys that keep those healthy and running correctly. And all these solutions we can provide as a total solution for your customer. One thing that really makes us unique in our space as well is we own our own help desk. So we have a team of people that sits in Omaha, Nebraska. It's all English speaking, all US based help desk. So if your customers need that level 1, level 2, where their employees need to call somebody and say, hey, my computer's not working quite right, we have a team that does that. And it's not a small team, honestly. We bill about $30 million a year for that particular service. So it is a pretty large scale team. We provide those services to companies like Cisco and HPE. So if your customers or end users are using Cisco equipment and they call Cisco for support, chances are the first call that they make is going to be to our guys. And we have about a 60% first call close rate for Cisco without having to escalate back into Cisco's engineering team. So really a key differentiator for us. So why hybrid IT? As I mentioned before, TierPoint is one of the largest hybrid IT providers in the United States. Why is hybrid IT important? Well, we've come as an industry, the IT industry, we've come to the conclusion, and it's not anything new, that one size doesn't fit all. And when you think about one size doesn't fit all, you typically think one solution doesn't fit every customer. Well, realistically in IT, one solution doesn't even fit every application within a single organization. So a lot of times you'll have your customers will have infrastructure that is a mix of, let's say, Intel-based virtualization, maybe some IBM mainframes, some voice over IP or telephony gear that you guys provide, and all that has to live in an environment. It all has to interconnect. It all has to talk together. So what we have done is we've put together a solution stack that can take into account all those different components of the solution, whether they have physical hardware, whether they need cloud, voice over IP, telephony, communications, all that. We become the nexus. We interconnect all that together. You bring your providers in, we bring the equipment in, we interconnect it all together, we manage it as a single happy ecosystem. This slide's a fairly busy slide, but it does show basically everything we do. And honestly, we do just about everything that you can think of in IT. I like to say the only thing we really don't do is we don't do custom programming. So if your customer needs a new point of sale system developed, we're not the organization to do that. We have partners that do that, but realistically we can do everything up to that. We could provide the hosting for the point of sale system, we can provide the management for the systems that run the point of sale system, we can provide help desk to the end users that use it, but we're not ever going to write that software itself. That's really about the only space within the IT industry that we don't fit and that we don't have specialties. Hello. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So what are some advantages to TierPoint? We like to boil it down into just a couple keywords. We're national. We have a coast-to-coast footprint. We're secure. A lot of our customers need high levels of compliance. A lot of our customers are healthcare, banking industry. We actually met with a credit union this morning. So obviously for those types of customers, all our solutions have to be secure. Scalable. We help a lot of customers, a lot of organizations grow from 1 to 5 employees up to thousands of employees. As that IT grows, our solutions will grow with them. Proven. We have over 5,500 customers throughout the U.S. We've got 11 of the Fortune 50 companies are customers of ours. Over 100 of the Fortune 500 companies are customers of ours. We're client focused. That's where I come in. I become an extension of your client's IT staff. I can help them evaluate what their current and future needs are, help them develop solutions for their current needs, as well as help develop a strategy and roadmap for their upcoming needs. And we're value driven. We understand that the solution is not the right solution if it doesn't meet the budget. So we've got a large tool chest, if you will, of different solutions that we can provide. So part of what I do is I come in, I help your customer analyze what their needs are, show them different options. Maybe the different options are different budgets, maybe they're different recovery times, speeds, feeds, whatever those differences are. I can show them a spectrum of solutions so that they can choose the one that meets all their business requirements. I mentioned before we have a coast-to-coast footprint. This is a map of our footprint. It's actually a little outdated. We have a sales office here in Atlanta now. We also have a sales office in Salt Lake City. These orange dots are where we have what we call our multi-tenant cloud. So that's cloud that we own, that we've put together. Does everybody in here have a pretty basic understanding of what cloud services are? Okay, I see mostly yeses. So what we've done is we've bought a lot of high-end enterprise equipment. We use VMware as our hypervisor, or our cloud software, if you will. And we provide that enterprise level equipment back as small time slices back to your end users. So even if the customer just needs 1 or 2 servers, they can still host it on a very reliable, very high-end enterprise solution for a good cost to fit their budget. We wrap all that stuff up with really high levels of SLA. So our typical SLA to the customers, 4 nines of uptime. All the other green marks are where we have data centers. We own and operate 42 data centers coast to coast. We have over 1 million square feet of raised floor space for your customers. So as your customers are coming to you talking about new phone systems, or maybe you see them ordering new IT systems, we've got a place coast to coast that we can fit them. So whatever their need, whatever their locality, we can provide it for them.
Are those your data centers, or you rent space in other data centers?
We own all of our data centers. That's a great question. So in the data center space, it is very common for data center providers to lease space from other larger wholesale type of data center providers. We own and operate all of the data centers ourselves. We own the property, we own all the equipment, all the assets inside, and we manage all of the equipment assets inside. So we're the ones managing the generators and the HVAC units and all the systems top to bottom within the data centers.
So you actually lease to other providers?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that lease, if you're talking about just co-location, that lease could be as small as 1 rack unit. So 1 server, 1 rack unit. Our largest customer leases from us about 8,500 square feet worth of space. So we can support any size infrastructure, whether it's small to large. These are great questions. Keep them up, guys. So what does this mean? I mean, really, when you guys look at a deal, you guys are looking at the tip of the iceberg. You're talking PBXs, you're talking voice most of the time, you're talking telephony. Well, a lot of times when you're talking to your customers, it's at some sort of inflection point within their business. Maybe they're going in a different direction, maybe they're splitting, maybe they're rolling out new services, new products. Well, a lot of times if you dig underneath the hood, you can determine that the customer doesn't just need your services you typically present. Maybe they need data center, maybe they need cloud, maybe they need managed services. That's where we come in and we can become your partner to provide those for you.
Citrix also?
We don't directly, but we have a couple partners that do Citrix for us. And the way we structure that is we'll hold the paper for the partner, we provide their SLAs through to the customer, so that we're controlling the customer experience. They would use our ticketing system, and then our partners leverage our ticketing system, so your customer has just one pane of glass.
So you help them also migrate if they have a Citrix network?
Absolutely, absolutely. So who should be selling to your point? I mean, really honestly, anybody who wants to make money. I know the agents that we've worked with within TCG have been very happy with the way that the compensation is structured for you guys. But really, as you guys are out there selling, your traditional products, just do a little bit extra feeling and say, hey, what are you doing with your IT? Is there any IT component that needs to be structured with this? As they're looking at buying a telephony system or an IP system, if it's actual physical hardware, ask them where they want to locate it. Do they want to locate it in their headquarters or their buildings down here in the Miami, Fort Lauderdale area where they're potentially at risk from hurricanes or other weather events, or would they rather keep it in a hardened facility that is specifically designed for maximum uptime and for maximum reliability? That's where we come in. We provide those facilities and we provide managed services on top of it. We also see a lot of MSPs or managed services providers. that rather than spending a lot of money developing their own product set, they'd prefer to use ours because it is rather mature, it is well tested and well proven. So a lot of managed services providers prefer to white label our services, so we see that a lot as well. So how do you uncover an opportunity? Really that's knowing your customer, it's talking to your customer and really listening for a couple keywords. When your customers start to talk to you about telephony, ask them, hey, you need this MPLS, what's on the other side of the MPLS? What are you connecting to, what applications are you connecting to, and how are those applications hosted? A lot of times that may be a new infrastructure that they're looking at hosting, and if they haven't purchased the equipment, that's a perfect opportunity to talk to your point and say, well, rather than you guys going out and capitalizing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gear, let's talk to your point about maybe using their cloud as an operating expense model. So instead of spending all that capital up front, we can turn it into an operating expense, make it a lot easier on their books. Another thing is disaster recovery. That's huge for us here in Florida. I live in Jacksonville. We've been hit by 2 hurricanes in 2 years. It's very rare for Jacksonville. Before last year, the most recent direct hurricane impact that we had was in the 60s. So it's really brought up a lot of awareness of uptime. There have been a lot of businesses, especially in Florida, that have been very complacent about disaster recovery. So we're hearing a lot more earnest discussions about disaster recovery. So as you hear those discussions with your end users and with your customers, that's a good opportunity to introduce TierPoint to them because we do have that national footprint. So we can take their IT assets, their telephony assets, and we can give them a second site that's outside of the seasonal risk of hurricanes so that they have alternate seasonal risks for their data centers. And then a lot of companies are looking at going to AWS or Azure. As they're talking about going to AWS or Azure, that's a great time to introduce TierPoint. The difference that we make in AWS and Azure, we're selling the same service as if they went directly to Microsoft and AWS, but we provide support for it, which has always been the big challenge with Azure and AWS. A lot of organizations start using Azure, they start using AWS, and when they have problems or when they have concerns, the support method and the support contact hierarchy is very obfuscated. It's very difficult. I heard somebody say it sucks. Absolutely. And that's where we come in. We're one of a small group of what they call 2-tier CSPs for Microsoft. And we have our own internal support mechanism where we have a very large enterprise support contract and we can leverage that on behalf for your end users. So that really gives them an actual support path as opposed to if they go directly to Microsoft, it's send an email, use the phone systems, hopefully you get through to somebody, and typically when you do get through to somebody, they're like, well, that's going to be a support incident. We need a credit card number that's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to support. So rather than do that, we can give you a predictable support model that has real people behind it that you can trust. So let's take a look at a couple deals. So this is a pharmaceutical research company that we this was a TCG Partnership Deal. So they came in looking for VoIP. Your agent then asked them, well, when you're about to move your offices, all your servers are located here. What are you going to do with them after you move? They mentioned to your agent that they were evaluating moving to the cloud. So what originally looked like a $2,100 a month deal for hosted PBX, we actually turned into over a $10,000 deal by adding managed services and hosted cloud services on top of that. The opportunity there was your agent knew the customer was moving. They knew that they had their servers hosted in-house. They just asked a simple question, well, I know your people are moving. What are you going to do with your servers? Do you really want to build another data center, or wouldn't you rather use this opportunity to go to the cloud or make your cloud strategy a little bit more effective for your organization? So it worked for the end user, gave them great levels of uptime. As I mentioned before, that solution has a 99.99 availability guarantee to the customer. And then your agent obviously saw a lot more quota retirement for adding those additional TierPoint services onto the contract. Another example is a managed services partner. So a managed services provider came to us. They were currently, when they came to us, they were looking to support 5 or 6 of their end user organizations that wanted to leverage AWS and Azure. They had a very difficult time supporting that because that skill set is changing constantly. In the year 2017, over 1,050 major product releases occurred within Azure. That's more than 3 a day. That's a lot to keep up with. So we've got a whole team, and their job is just to keep up with those changes and help support those changes for the end users. So they looked at Azure, they looked at AWS, they felt it was a challenge. Instead, we gave them an opportunity to evaluate multiple platforms. We said, okay, this is what Azure would look like for your end users as far as cost, as far as the support model, as far as the capabilities and the scalability. We also showed them a TierPoint private cloud Private cloud is when we build a cloud with dedicated equipment just to one organization. We explained to them the growth possibility for that. We showed them the SLAs and the support model for that, and they ended up choosing to move to the private cloud. So before, they had 5 customers that were paying $600 a month for AWS. They moved into a private cloud, got a better support model, got better scalability, and also a more predictable cost model, which is huge. Azure and AWS, your bill fluctuates on a month-to-month basis. So they chose the private cloud solution because it fit their business needs a lot better.
So maybe just real quick here, since I created that deck, it's been a while. We've had a couple of really big wins. We had a 28K win last fall with a multi-site healthcare type organization. 28K private cloud. Maybe just talk about that for a minute. And then the one we did just more recently, like in November, was like 22K for an actual UCaaS hosting company. So they have their own call center application and they are running it on, to your point, dedicated private cloud infrastructure. So just maybe real quick on those two.
Yeah,
those are
I think that was
big
about
money
last.
deals, right?
Yeah. So those solutions, they came to us, and every single time they come to us, and they have some high level concepts. I need better hosting. I need better cost. A lot of times it's, hey, I'm hosted currently, but the hosting is ineffective, or a lot of times it's just honestly it's, hey, these guys aren't doing a good job, and so they come to us and we fix that. So yeah, absolutely. We have a UCaaS solution. Customer came to us. They have a UCaaS platform. Obviously, when you're doing unified communications, they were doing a lot of remote desktop sessions as well on the platform. Their requirements were very stringent around performance. So we built them a private cloud. We enabled the private cloud with all flash. So instead of using traditional hard drives, we used all flash or SSD, if you're used to that term. We allowed them to test the environment, make sure that it worked for their applications, and then we managed the migration for them. So our team, obviously every single customer that we have, every customer that we onboard does some sort of migration. So we've got a great internal team that does migrations and assists customers with moving into the data center. So our team is doing all the heavy lifting, move the environment into our data center. As opposed to the customer trying to figure it out and having to learn and build that extra skill set within their IT organization, we have that skill set available, and we leverage that for our customers. Another opportunity that Miranda just mentioned, a healthcare company. Once again, they had some hosting. It wasn't necessarily the most scalable hosting. It didn't fit their changing business needs. So they came to us and talked to us about private cloud. Obviously, being a healthcare organization, security is very foremost in their mindset. So we were able to entice them with the level of security that we provide in our data center. All of our data centers are HIPAA high-tech certified, so that's very important to your healthcare customers. All of our data centers are also PCI certified, so all of your payment card customers, anybody that uses payment cards or any kind of financial transactions, our data centers and our products are built to those standards of security. Yes, Sarbanes-Oxley, GLBA, pretty much any level of compliance that your customers are asking for, we probably support. We actually have a couple customers that go through FDA audits, and I know everybody's heard about HIPAA and high tech. FDA audits make those look like kindergarten. When the FDA comes in and they're inspecting infrastructure, it's pretty hardcore. But we support those compliance levels for your customers. A great benefit of that as well is these audits are not easy. Anybody here ever participated or overseen like any kind of PCI or HIPAA audit? It's pretty painful for your IT team. It really honestly is. But when you leverage, to your point, for those components of your infrastructure, when the auditors come to talk to your customers, instead of them having to go through that audit process, they can say, well, these 10 components are provided by TierPoint, and we've got a whole team that will work with the auditors on their behalf. So it really takes a lot off their plate. So I think that's pretty much what we had to go over today. Any questions out there? Yes, sir.
So we had somebody recently ask about help desk.
Yes.
Do you guys manage and do that?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Okay,
So.
to what point do you start at?
So we have a help desk team. They live in Omaha, Nebraska. It's all U.S.-based help desk. We can start, I think the volume's as low as 200 tickets a month. And we support all the way up to, I mentioned earlier, we support Cisco and HPE for our help desk. So if your end users are using Cisco equipment and they have to call in for SmartNet support, the first call, chances are it's our team actually answering the first call for them, handling it through level 1, level 2, and then when it gets really hairy, then we hand back off to Cisco engineers at level 3. Same thing with HPE, CVS pharmacies. So the pharmacists, if their computers in the pharmacy are not working, When they call help desk, they think they're calling CVS help desk. We answer the phone CVS help desk, but it's really our guys in Omaha answering and helping them work through their issues.
And we'll do some other things like off-hours support, so we have customers that'll they'll manage their own help desk from 8 to 5, and then we pick up the off-hours support and continue to, log and ticket, route, and monitor, during the time where their help desk isn't online, yeah.
Yeah, and that product set's a key differentiator for us. In our space, there's no other organization that does it, and especially not at the scale that we do it. But a great question. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Are all these data centers carrier agnostic?
Yeah, so all our data centers are carrier agnostic. When you look at our data centers, so I live in Jacksonville. We have a great data center up in Jacksonville. We have 9 providers that we've brought in that we use as our primary services. So when your customers move into our data center, we prefer for them to use our internet service because we blend multiple providers together. They could bring their own link in. And so to that effect, we are carrier agnostic, and we have all the last mile fiber providers in all markets. So typically, we're on net with just about every provider because we've got that last mile already built in. But great question. Any other questions out there? Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. So, a lot of the guys in the room are IT-based guys, a lot of the guys maybe telephony. I know you hit on some of the questions to kind of cover some of these things, but can you just kind of drill down on maybe some questions to, I know, like, what's your cloud strategy for 2018? What are some of the questions you think would be pertinent?
Yeah. So what's your cloud strategy? A lot of times we just like to go in and just say, hey, talk to me about your major initiatives for your IT over the next year. What's your next 12 months look like? What are your major projects? And if they're server-related, cloud-related projects, a lot of times, to your point, can come in and help. Disaster recovery is a key. These days, everybody's on edge about disaster recovery. So as you're talking to organizations, when you hear them talking about, well, this year, disaster recovery is an initiative. We've talked about it every year for the last 10 years, but this is the year we're going to get disaster recovery in place. We're a great provider that can help really rationalize that whole process. We can help them evaluate what their payloads are, what the impact of the business is to them for those payloads being offline, and help them put together a comprehensive plan on how to protect their applications. As you see them going through a hardware refresh, so when they come to you and say, hey, we built all this stuff 5 years ago, somehow we got 5 years out of all this stuff, but now we got to replace it, so they start talking to you guys about replacing the front-end telephony and phone systems. Well, all that other stuff's probably going through a hardware refresh as well. Rather than them going out and stroking a couple $100,000 check to CDW to buy hardware, you can have them talk to us, and we can provide it to them as an operating expense, as a hosted solution, either in our cloud or in traditional form factor servers. That takes that deal off the street, makes that hardware turn into operating expense that you guys can put on contract and see some quarter retirement for it. Any other ideas for questions to ask up front, Miranda?
So you said you manage like the front end piece for AWS and Azure.
Yes.
Rackspace kind of does something similar to that.
Yes.
Can you guys kind of talk about the pros and cons?
Yeah, so realistically, we're very competitive in that space with them. A couple differentiators is our Azure team is they're focused on hybrid IT. So a lot of times Rackspace will say we'll manage your Azure for you, but if you have an AS400 or a mainframe or a bunch of telephony equipment that you need to interact with that Azure equipment, a lot of times that's a gap in their offering. But realistically, it's the customer focus. We are customer focused. We have industry-leading customer satisfaction numbers, and then the upfront consultation. So a lot of our competitors, I know Rackspace is in this arena. Customer will come and say, "This is what I'm doing in Azure right now. Can you take over management?" And they just say, "Sure," and they say, "Okay, it's going to cost X." Well, when a customer comes to me and says, "This is what I'm currently doing in Azure," I say, "Okay, well, before we tell you anything about this, we're going to evaluate what you're doing. We're going to evaluate your spend. And we're going to assess the infrastructure, make sure that you're properly leveraging all the assets that you have in Azure, make sure that your spend is efficient. We're going to help you optimize that spend before we start layering management on top of that." So I would say the customer focus and the upfront consultation is really what sets us apart.
And we're much more of an engineer-to-order company. So we were talking about the private cloud scenarios. That's really where we excel. We don't have a gold, silver, bronze. We don't have an ABC offering. It's all engineered based upon what the customer's needs are. We don't really have packages that you can buy in the same frame of reference that a Rackspace does. And we also don't do web hosting either. That's
Okay.
not our game.
Yep. Yes, sir.
I understood that you're providing last mile down here too?
Not down here, in our data centers.
Okay.
So in the markets we have data centers, we have engaged with all the last mile fiber providers. Everybody that owns fiber in Jacksonville is in our data center. Everybody that owns fiber in Nashville is in our data center. So we make sure to lock up all those last miles, so that streamlines the onboarding for your end users. So instead of 45 to 90-day lead times, we have 15 to 30-day lead times to build into our data center. And a lot of times it's also cost effective and helps lower the cost.
But you'll offer last mile if it.
We don't sell it. No, that's not something that you would sell.
Yeah, we don't sell it. Yeah.
Bring your own.
It's bring your own,
Yeah.
exactly. If there was any
Yeah.
confusion there,
Do you have
we
any
don't,
preference?
no, anybody, as long as they're lit in our data center, doesn't matter.
Yeah, and then once they're in our data center, we do prefer for them to use our internet. And the reason we do that, like I said, we bring in multiple providers, we blend those providers together, we present that back to your customer as a transparent service. We give 100% guarantee to network. So if they use our internet, we guarantee 100% uptime for their internet. Yes, sir.
I couldn't help but notice one of your catchphrases that you're kind of pummeling at us is that the client, as opposed to doing the expansion on hardware, you're using the term operating expense on the books. With the different people we talk to within the different countries, our contacts seem to be the more tech-savvy people, not necessarily the accountant,
Correct.
not necessarily the owner. So I'm asking, what if you could steer me in the direction of how I can use that phrase so that it is something they grasp and can introduce to their accountant, to the
Right.
business check signer, so that the comprehension level, as opposed to the catchphrase only.
Okay, yeah, and so in a previous life, I was a CIO.
Okay.
And I know within the organization I was in, so I was CIO for 2015, 2016. 2015, I had a really nice capital budget, and my operating budget was really flexible. A lot of times organizations will be a lot more flexible with their operating budget. 2016 rolled around, and we went through budget review, and they're like, honestly, we're really capital constrained. A lot of the market right now, they don't have one-time costs that they can spend. They'd rather spend money over time. So for me as a CIO, my CFO came to me and he said, hey, this year your capital budget is like a third of what it was last year. And so for me, a big challenge that year was trying to figure out how to do things that I typically would have spent up front. So if I had a bunch of hardware to buy, I had to figure out how, instead of buying it all at once, do I want to lease it from a vendor? Do I want to go to a company like TierPoint, and instead of buying hardware, maybe I'm going to buy cloud services. So that on the ledger, it shows differently. Your IT team may or may not be educated on that. If you're talking to the IT director or CIO, typically they understand at a pretty good level the difference between capital expense and operating expense. Most organizations have an internally discussed preference, whether they prefer to spend capital or whether they'd prefer operating expense. But really, we'll structure it either way. I know I mentioned it a number of times, and that's just because the market in general, there's an aversion to spending capital right now in the market in general. So we've seen a lot of success with that. But if you have a company that comes to us and says, you know what, I'd really rather spend it up front. I had a customer just last month that said, hey, if I give you 40 grand up front, what's that going to do to my monthly? So they bought down the monthly by paying an upfront expense.
Like when you buy a car, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand, how I can get that point across so that it can perhaps close some deals that are coming.
Right.
In the sense that, we can do it this way, and the benefits would be X, as opposed to going this way, which we Y.
Yeah, and I know, so the CIO of Baptist Medical Center up in Jacksonville is a pretty good friend of mine. And he's told me before, hey, if I have to sign an invoice that is over 10 grand, then I have to go upstream to get approval. But if it's under 10 grand, I can sign it and it just flies through and everything's great. Well, if I'm going to buy new hardware, a lot of times that might be $150,000, $200,000 worth of gear. But if I were going to turn that into like a cloud solution, that $200,000 worth of gear might only be $1,500, $1,800 a month over 36 months. So with those different levels, if it was $150,000 capital, they got to go upstream, they got to get approval, and then, really it's the same spend over the same amount of time, or pretty close. They can then turn it into an operating expense. Maybe they don't have to go through the same approval methods. Maybe they don't have to have as many different people sign it. Maybe it's just a quicker process to get approved.
So you'll drill down right to desktops.
We typically don't do desktops. We have partners that do that. Really, we're focused more on the server infrastructure and the help desk.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
won't roll trucks, so we're not
Yeah.
gonna go fix Susie's computer when it's broken on site, we won't do that.
Yeah.
No, just use it, so you try to use them as a.
Yeah. Now, what we
I
do,
wonder how far you went down.
Yeah, so all the way down to the application level, so you can
Yeah.
get, and then we have partners, if you have customers that wanna do VDI, we're seeing a huge uptick in VDI right now in the market, I don't know what's going on, but, we have a partner, we have a couple partners that go on our paper and will manage the actual VDI images in the data center. On customer prem, we don't do anything on customer prem.
and VDI, in case everybody in here isn't aware, VDI's virtual desktop infrastructure. So I think there was a question about Citrix earlier. Citrix would be an example of a VDI platform.
And we do have other carriers that do that, just in case somebody needs that, to do that.
Yes, sir.
So if I were to put a customer in your cloud, server, multiple servers, you would give them help desk support?
We can. So
Is it separate or there's a?
So what are we talking about in terms of help desk support? Are you
Yeah.
talking about like, hey, my server's broken, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would all be included. When we talk about help desk, we're talking about.
Everything.
We're talking
End
about,
users.
hey, I got locked out of my computer this morning, Miranda, I'm an individual, employee of a company. That type of end user customer support is a separate solution, right? It's outsourced help desk. In terms of support for whatever's in the data center, yeah, we would provide that as part of your solution.
yeah, and we can develop that solution to be as managed or unmanaged as a customer wants. It's not uncommon a customer comes in and says, hey, I just need the racks and the power and the connectivity, and I'll manage all the stuff in the racks myself. That's not uncommon.
Traditional colo.
Yeah, traditional colo. We do have services and solutions we can layer on top of that colo that says, hey, we're going to be your Windows admins, we're going to be your storage admins, we're going to manage your virtualization. So we can become their IT staff as much as they want or as little as they want. And those are all a la carte services. So as we develop a solution for your customer, we'll show them options. Here's an unmanaged option, here's a co-managed option, here's a fully outsourced option. Show them different options with different management levels to support them. A lot of times organizations will come to us and say, hey, I've got 40 guys in IT. I don't need your help, I just need your space and power. Other times we see a lot of organizations, I've got 2 guys, they're running constantly, they're overloaded, we can't even get to this project, so that's where they start to engage outsource managed services through us. But yeah, absolutely, we can tailor that to their needs.
And then if they were on your help desk, you would refer anything low-level user back to their
Yeah.
IT people.
Yeah, so the way that works is if we become their end user help desk, so Sally in accounting calls up and says, my printer doesn't work. We run them through level 1 and level 2 help desk testing. So, well, let's reboot your computer, let's check the drivers, let's do a couple, basic network tests. If we determine it's something, what we call level 3, where somebody on the local IT team then needs to engage, we then pass the ticket back to the local IT team. Hey, we've been through all these troubleshooting steps. It looks like it's something, on premise at your customer location. So then we pass it back to them. But the nice thing about it is they then have a consolidated ticketing platform that all those tickets that come through us, they can go through, they can see historical information, they can read through the trail on how we supported any incident. They have a great audit trail. Yes, sir.
And do they close it on your system? Excuse me.
Yeah, they can close it on our system.
And we
absolutely.
integrate, we'll backwards integrate with most customer ticketing systems.
How long has TierPoint been around as TierPoint?
As TierPoint, 3.5, 4 years?
Well, TierPoint existed long before that, since like
Okay.
the 90s. So
Okay.
the first couple data centers were up in Seattle.
Okay.
And they were the original TierPoint. And so as Jerry Kent went out and bought 43 data centers, he really liked the name TierPoint. So he's like, we're gonna roll this across, we really like the name. So TierPoint exists now as 43 data centers that are comprised of 6 or 7 different companies.
Also with that, when you go through and say that you have a client who is interested in this, your contracts, are they 12, 24, 36, 48, or how do you roll them?
We prefer 36, but we can
Okay,
do a
36.
12-month or a 6
What are you
week.
doing on the retention levels?
How do we see retention levels?
Yes.
I do know that over 60% of our month-to-month growth comes from existing customers.
Okay.
It's a little difficult for me to say much about retention levels because Florida is a fairly new market for us.
Okay. I
so-
wasn't asking specifically about Florida. I was asking about TierPoint as a rule.
Yeah, I focus on Florida, Georgia, so I don't know nationally what our
We're
retention rate
privately
is.
held, I mean, they don't tell us that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can go to my client and say that I'm not sure of the retention level, let's just try these guys. That's really, I'm some really positive for getting on there.
I can see if they'll give me some numbers.
Yeah.
I can see if they'll give me some numbers, yeah.
I mean, typically when you tell an organization that 60% of our monthly revenue growth comes from existing customer base, that's a pretty good indicator.
Bases grow,
Right.
not necessarily change. So that's what I'm looking for a specific.
Yeah,
answer.
no, and I agree with that, but that 60% number, that's including churn, so that 60% growth includes, us taking out churn for customers that we don't retain. And that's a pretty good indicator that our customers are happy with the services that they're getting because they're wanting to buy more.
Our net promoter scores, I mean, in all candor, we all use NPS, right? And our net promoter scores are almost exactly the same as what you see with Rackspace. Our businesses are a little different, and that's all out there on the internet.
Any other questions?
So one
Yes, sir.
quick question. So we just had an opportunity recently where they had some significant data breaches, and I guess their IT company that they're using was not doing a good job for them. I mean, in that type of situation, how would you guys sell that customer? I mean, what would you say to that customer?
Yeah, so we would come in, we do an analysis, figure out why, first of all, they probably already have a lot of information about how the breach occurred, why it occurred, what the fault was that had it occur. We come in and we do an analysis to, corroborate that information, figure out where they are. And then, depending on what we find, like I said, we have a pretty broad spectrum. And then for a customer like that, specifically that's concerned about breaches, we even do things like vulnerability scans and penetration tests. So I think I mentioned before, we were talking to a credit union this morning. Obviously, as a credit union, they're concerned about penetration into their environment. So part of the solution we provided to them is vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, where on a regular basis we do those tests to make sure that they don't have any open holes out in the internet. But our security products are tailor fit for that type of solution. We are on the hook for managing not just the security, but the upkeep of the security, because that's important. I'm sure everybody in here has heard about Meltdown and the Scepter and all the things that are going on right now in the IT industry. So we, for managed services customers, we maintain and keep those patches and those security incidents handled. Any other questions? I guess one thing I should say is when you're selling TierPoint services, you're not expected to sell them alone. Miranda and I are your support team. We will stand next to you in the customer meetings. We will sell our products on your behalf to your customers. You guys are in great hands with Miranda. She was actually number 3 in the President's Club last year for TierPoint. So she understands the TierPoint message. She understands the products, and she understands the market, more importantly. And then I, as your solution engineer, I've been selling and managing data center solutions for about 13 years. I've been in the IT industry since 1989. I've had roles anywhere from, I've been the help desk guy all the way up to CIO. I've been a database administrator, network administrator, VMware administrator. So really any seat in the IT department, I can understand their needs and what their day-to-day looks like, so I can really help develop a strategy and solution for your customer. If there are no more questions, thank you guys for your time. I appreciate it, and look forward to partnering.